WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We've mixed things up around here politically, socially, spiritually. We've even had a little food and beverages. I'm about to take a crab cake tour. One place I will not be going for a crab cake will be Cleveland, Ohio. We welcome in the Believeland guy himself. And, I feel bad about all this purple stadia behind me, but Andy Billman, I just want to say this to you. For many, many years, you can go watch any of my YouTube videos. There was a picture of Art Modell behind me that when Art passed away at his funeral, it was gifted to me by David and the family. I left it on the ledge behind me for many years, but I started the green screen around here like a couple of weeks ago and Zooming. Andy Billman does film work and makes great things that you've seen, that I've seen at ESPN and other places. And I was working on, a story that I know a little bit about, right? Like, it's the only time a player has died on a baseball field, but it has a heck of a Cleveland connection. And you do what the Ken Burns types like you do from Illyria, which is make film and make things and make stories come to life 100 years later, right?
Yeah, thank you for that great introduction. Wow, we could touch a little. We'll go down the Modell lane here, I'm sure, in a few. But to bring
Factory of Sadness.
the Factory of Sadness, which we're excited as Browns fans for 2021. But going to what we're doing here today. So when I was doing Believeland, a lot of people would approach me and they said, "Have you ever heard about the Ray Chapman story?" When I was growing up in Cleveland, because the Indians were so poor, you really heard about 54 and 48 and Bob Feller and Lemon. You really never heard about 1920. And so I said, actually, I'm not familiar with the Ray Chapman story. And so I'm bringing the story to life. And what it explains to me as a Clevelander, for people who don't know, there is the Yankees, of course, are that premier team because of all their championships and because of all their pizzazz. But there is a certain angst in Clevelanders about the Yankees. And I never really understood why. And we're going to pinpoint how this started. In 1920, there was an event where both the Indians and Yankees were on a collision course. The Yankees had Ruth, Tress Speaker for the Indians, along with star player Ray Chapman.
I was going to say, we're familiar with Ruth. Ruth, he's got a statue over here, right? Like, and there was all of this angst here about whether we could even have a statue of a Yankee who was a Baltimorean out in front of it. So I hear you, man.
Yeah, no, I hear it. And so, right. And so you had this collision course. And then in 1920, on August 16th, Carl Mays, a pitcher for the Yankees, he's a submarine pitcher, throws a submarine pitch. Chapman never saw it. Ray Chapman hit in the temple, falls down, gets up, collapses in center field, and then later dies that night, tragically. And it became a big mourning. And obviously, a lot of feelings were dealt with in the city and whatever else. But more importantly for Chapman off the field, Chapman was Mr. Cleveland. He had just married into royalty in Cleveland, the Daly family, which is a rich oil tycoon family. They had this big, huge ceremony in 19 in the fall. He was actually transitioning to become one of the big businessmen in Cleveland. So there
was no bigger celebrity in the 20s than being a baseball player in an American city, right? Like, there were no actors, right? There were no films really. No. There were tycoons, right? I mean, I'm trying to think of who would be famous and what would make you famous in 1920. You'd be famous because you were in the newspaper, right? I mean, that would be the only place people would have access to your fame in a fishbowl, literally 100 years ago, right?
Correct. And so and by the way, you're right. And even in that time period too, I mean, obviously we're way past the days of any kind of telecommunication aside from radio. So really all you have is newspapers and stuff. So to your point, Ray Chapman's even a bigger star because that's really one of the few names people all knew. I mean, you might know a Daly, but do you know what really Daly looks like? Or do you know what a Rockefeller looks like? Probably not. But Ray Chapman, you do. So you have his baseball card, or even then you go to the ballpark and you can physically see him perform on the field. So to your point, he's even more of a celebrity because he's one of the few people can identify with.
This happened at the Mistake on the Lake because the stadium was
Polo Grounds. It happened in the the Polo Grounds. And then what ended up happening is, there's a quick funeral. There was a whole discussion. Actually, teams were deciding of whether they were going to protest or not, whether they were going to go on. The St. Louis Browns actually were to the point we don't want to go forward because we think Carl Mays is someone who shouldn't be in the game. The Yankees pitcher became this whole controversy. The Yankees and the Indians
was this trying to ban a submarine pitch?
Ban him because Carl Mays had a reputation of beaning people. In fact, in 1920. He had beaten more people as a person, one person, as the Indians threw as a whole team. I think he had even almost double as many pitches beamed at a player compared to the whole team for the Indians. So he had a reputation for hitting players. And Carl Mays' contention, which I think Carl was right, he wasn't trying to kill Ray Chapman. But there were some people who thought he was maliciously trying to threaten him or hurt him, because his big thing is, hey, I want to come inside. If you don't have the plate, I have the plate, and I'm going to throw underneath you to protect that plate. And we ended up uncovering some audio of him right before he passed away, and he was still very passionate about how he understood, and he felt terrible. But he goes, he even said to this day, we're going to bring up in the film, he thought Chapman was just as much at fault as he was, even though he threw the pitch, because he thought that Chapman was crowd the plate.
Were they wearing helmets? They weren't wearing helmets then, right? No.
Not until the 60s. So it became this whole controversial thing. And what ended up happening is the Indians and Yankees and the the Chicago White Sox, were in a seeded pennant race. And the Indians miraculously came back and won the pennant. And they ended up winning the World Series. And the Indians won the first ever, compared to the Yankees. The Yankees at that time had never won a pennant, never won a World Series. So the Indians actually won a World Series before the Yankees did, with Ruth. So that's always something that kind of we can celebrate here as Clevelanders. We only have two.
You got to celebrate something, dude. I mean, you are the Believeland guy. So,
you gotta believe.
Far be it for me to go back 102 years or whatever here to try to figure out championships. Andy Billman is here. He does films, and tell me, I looked you up like on the internet, and you could brag on yourself about the things you've been involved in, but
sure.
I haven't seen all of the ESPN 30 for 30s, but my favorite was the Escobars, the two Escobars. And, one of the things that I talk about a lot with Baltimore Positive, and maybe we could talk about this a little bit with the reputation of your damaged community and my damaged community. And let's throw Detroit in just to make them feel good, right? Or resurrection stories of like what Pittsburgh's doing with tech and with, Carnegie money and Duquesne money, like all of that, right? I would just say for cities lifting up and stuff, one of the stories about Colombia and about Medellin and I've had friends that have lived in Medellin. I'm Venezuelan by birth, right? But I've had friends that have lived in Medellin recently. And apparently, as much as Venezuela's a mess and, there have been so many people leaving the country, Colombia's kind of changed, right? So like you document these things, and even it's been 15 years since that movie, right? Probably, right?
Yeah, it came out in 2010, so it's 11 years now.
11 years, okay.
That's a remarkable film. I mean, I'll get to the filmmaking and then get to the story that you're hitting on. For a film that's mostly in Spanish, so you're reading the film, you're speaking English, it's remarkable how much that film connected with people. It is just a tremendous, tremendous film. I remember when I watched the first rough cut, I paused it. I'm like, this is unbelievably good. You felt.
And you're a guy that makes things, and like I do segments here all day. Some are better than others, Of
course. It was one of those few times you're like, hit pause. Like I typed my executive, like, we're good, right? Like, because I've watched only 30 minutes, and it is nonstop action. And what was great about that film is you felt like I had heard about Pablo Escobar. I had heard about Escobar, the soccer player. I did not know they're intertwining, but I felt like I knew them personally. I could touch them and feel them. And to humanize someone like Pablo Escobar is not easy, because he seems like a monster. I mean, he's a drug lord. I mean, he kills people. I mean, my gosh. But at one point you're like, oh my gosh, like it almost felt like Tony Soprano from Sopranos.
Oh, it's like, total mobster, Putin-y, all of this stuff, but it's real life, and it happened in our lifetime, and it happened under our noses, and World Cup soccer, the whole deal, right?
You're right, all deal, and it made you, not that you like, not that he's a sympathetic character, he's not, but you felt like he was humanized, and he's not a humanizing character, and that's what made that so great. And what made the film great is it made you understand even more. It wasn't just Escobar being murdered for scoring your own goal. There was a much larger impact society-wise, and in that film, it took you there. I mean, you being from that world, I obviously never been there, but I felt like I knew them after that film. I could relate to them on that film, and I've never been to Colombia, never been in that world. But
I spent time in Venezuela in the 80s, right? So I had a little vibe for like what it looked like, what it felt like, what the passion is for baseball in Venezuela. I've been to Cuba, so I know what the passion is there, and certainly the soccer passion. I've been to Buenos Aires, I've been to Brazil to know what that's about, but to know what that's about, a generation ago, literally a lifetime ago now. But I have found it to be an interesting story as a a civic reclamation, for what drugs and cartel, for what the worst part of the mafia did and what's now happened to that community 30, 40 years later.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, I mean, it's like you said, it's not about just wins and losses in a World Cup. It went much, much, much deeper. And to see that connection and how it started and how Escobar was involved in soccer on a real ground level, and to see how much money he pumped into people and gave this whole thing, you're right, the civicness of that. I mean, it just wasn't just about an own goal and fans being disappointed about the loss. That's what I thought originally when you watched what happened in the news reports in '94. What you learned is a much deeper impact that went far deeper. And that's why The Escobars is a wonderful film.
Well,
Really
you
brings
mentioned 94, so I'll bring it to 95 and talk about the confluence of Believeland and me losing my football team when I was 15 years old, and the Mayflowers running in and taking the team off to Indy with our colors. I was in Cleveland the day that the Bengals-Browns game happened. I was literally privy to stuff going on at that time because this is my 30th year on the radio, so I was at World Series games at the Jake in 95, sitting in the upper deck with Eric Singer from Kiss, freezing our ass off watching him play the Braves. And 2 weeks later, the football team's here. 3 weeks later, I'm on a plane out there. Mike White's stumping on the corner. We want the team, the colors, the name, all of that. I remember it all vividly. And your Believeland thing, I've just had so many friends from Cleveland, dated girls from Cleveland, had great times in Cleveland. I was with Gary Miller the night that the piss happened out of the basement. We don't talk about that at the network. But yeah, I mean, listen, I love me some Cleveland, right? Like, and I've spent.
You are. That's pretty good.
I go to Cleveland all the time, so I would just say this: your film moved me in a way, but also for what I've done for a living for 30 years. When we stole your football team, brought Billiken here, drafted Ray Lewis, signed a couple of Hall of Famers, won a Super Bowl immediately, right? I then wrote this Believeland kind of thing for Baltimore. I still do that with these clowns here, right? Who can't get out of their own way, right? Literally the parking lot, it looks like it's about 150 yards, but it's a long way. And what it does for a community, what that meant, that first parade here, the Trent Dilfer parade, what that meant when 5 years earlier we had tried for 15 years just to get a team, just let us in. The Redskins tried to put their stadium in Laurel. I mean, it's a hell of a story. I mean, John Zeman kept the band together. You guys made a movie about that.
Yes, we did. Barry Levinson.
Great movie about that. So, the Baltimore Cleveland thing, it really is about civic. I love the town. It's where I'm from. I'll fight you if you're from Pittsburgh or Cincinnati or whatever it is. And I think that that's at the heart of sports, right? And that's at the heart of the stories you tell.
Hey, look, it's spunky. There's a whole look. I'm gonna give you a Clevelander perspective. It's nothing against Baltimore. What Art Modell did was wrong, because he eventually sold the team. If I were in your shoes and your beautiful background, oh my God, I'd be loving it. And I get it. But what Art Modell did was wrong. And it really, really interrupted a lot of things in Cleveland and interrupted a lot of things civically in Cleveland.
Yeah, it got you a stadium and it got you an owner you allegedly liked. And
but it interrupted things.
It stopped you back.
it stopped things. But at the same point, like, look, again, it makes it fun in sports because do the Ravens and Browns like each other? But no. We don't, but here's what we do like. We like the competition. The spunkiness of the AFC North is wonderful. Do I like the Steelers? Hell no. Do I like the Ravens? No. Do I like the Bengals? But it all makes it spunky and fun. But what makes it big for this one, for Baltimore and Cleveland, is one thing. It's Art Modell. What Art Modell did was wrong. He should have never moved the team. He eventually had to sell the team to Biscotti. Why? Because he was broke. He needed money back. He should have sold the team to someone locally in Cleveland. Baltimore should have eventually gotten the team that the Browns got and taken that team in 1999. And that's the way it should happen. It didn't. Are we still not over in Cleveland? Of course not. With a move changed everything. It took until one Baker Mayfield win in Pittsburgh, really in the playoffs, to get us feeling great again. It's the first time in my lifetime as a Browns fan going into this year, I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't remember the move. So that's how impactful it was. And again, for time purposes, there's a lot of economics. Watch Believeland. There's a lot of things that was building up through the Indians' 90s, that was building up through positivity. The city was finally turning around in the mid 90s. It really felt like that momentum and positivity halted that day when the Browns left.
My first trip into Cleveland was the day John Elway destroyed you guys for the drive game. So I've been telling that story since '87 too. Andy Billman is here. He makes movies, makes fine movies, and makes them sometimes about Cleveland amongst other things, and has been at ESPN for a long, long time. You know, you wear that tribe hat, and I'm into the baseball thing right now because it's baseball season. And you know, I had Bob Ryan and Dan Shaughnessy on last week talking about how the Red Sox might be number 4 on any given day in Boston.
Really?
Behind the Patriots, the Celtics clear number 2 in their mind.
Really?
And the Bruins fall out of bed, where the Red Sox are going to lose 90 games this year, 100 games, whatever it's going to be, right? Huh. Cleveland's fascinating to me. First off, I mean, I knew the Modells well,
sure.
Know the heirs, all of that, know all the storytelling. Again, I started going to Cleveland in the 80s. I'm having Dave Parker on in an hour. My story with Dave Parker is in 1991, I went to see the Smithereens at the Empire Rock Club, and it was an electrical storm, and I wound up at the Mistake on the Lake at like 1 a.m. in the 7th inning of a game against the Angels, and there were 212 people and 2 strippers walking around. And, you know, like it had rained all night, and they didn't start the game till 11:30, and it was like, come on down, folks, Bob Feller. So, I pulled in and did that. So I have these amazing Cleveland, experiences and these memories, but most of them were bad major league kind of baseball, legitimately in that era, as you talked about bad baseball in your youth.
Bad baseball, yeah.
And then, Grover, and we gave you Eddie Murray and shipped you over Dennis Martinez, and the next thing Albert Bell, all of that happened. I was there for all that, right? I mean, like Hershiser. I mean, I got pictures on the field with Chris Berman at 95. So like, I love all of that, but I thought like Baltimore, when we were drawing 3 million people, and there was Tony Fernandez hitting home runs off of Benitez to break our hearts.
Oh my God!
Happened, right? So I can bring all of this up. I would just say baseball was at the heart of both. Man, 100 years later, you're a football town. We're a football town. And one thing that the Modells would always be shocked by, that this could ever really be a football town. Like, they came here and this was so Cal Ripkened up, so Baltimore, Washington, Orioles up, all of that. To think that these people own the place and these people are a joke. And in your town, the baseball thing, it hasn't gone poorly, but they're never going to be the Browns. And I guess with LeBron, they're never going to be what the Cavaliers provided or what Ohio State provides even.
Well, right. Gosh, there's a lot to dissect here. Okay, let's go. I'm actually going to go through your lane. You're right. My dad was a traveling salesman, so we lived briefly in Roanoke, Virginia. So I know about the Washington Redskin presence, and you're right. If you would have told me years later that there'd be this new team called the Ravens and they'd be the team, that I would never believe that. And especially with what we saw through, you're right.
If my dad would have come back and seen the Senators come back to life and put the Orioles out of business, it's insane.
It's insane. It's crazy. Especially, it's funny. It's finally gone back. Even up in like 5 years ago, you're still hearing about Ripken, and you'd see that one turned down on the brick facade there in Baltimore. That was still a big moment. It's finally kind of gone in away in the distance. So that's how big Ripken was. I mean, he was huge. That was a big Americana moment.
26 years ago, half my life. I'm 52.
Man, it was Ripken in that moment. I still get goosebumps thinking about it. That was a great moment with him passing Lou Gehrig and running around the field. It was just a great moment. So you're right, it has. And the big thing about Cleveland's this: the Indians are actually very well repped and very representative. The one thing I'll say about Indians fans is every fan, I'm sure it's different in Baltimore too. I'm sure there's Orioles fans and Raven fans. There has to be. Because even though in Cleveland, everyone's a Clevelander fan for the most part. We cheer for all 3 teams.
It's gone along black and white way before Trump here. I do sports radio for a living, right? Like, I'm temperature, stick my thumb all the time. I mean, the baseball crowd, the football crowd are not the same here. Not like when I was growing up working at the newspaper in the 80s, and you just loved the Terps and you loved lacrosse and you followed UMBC and you liked Towson, and and probably in your city where you like the Force or the Crunch or Cleveland State, or you followed other
Ohio
things.
State football is like a big one too, you mentioned, and you're right. And so the thing is with Clevelanders, especially Indians fans, 100 years in studying the Indians as much as I have for this film right now, this is actually pretty consistent for Indians fans. When the Indians are winning, not only do they sell out, you can't get enough of it. You'll have people hanging off tree limbs trying to get into the field, whether it's League Park, whether it's Municipal, whether it's Jacobs, now Progressive Field. Indians fans get into it and they get sucked into the vortex and they can't get enough of it. However, Indians fans, they smell someone who they don't think is going to win. They not just don't, they get excited, they come out. They just don't even do that. They don't come. And that's been an Indians pattern for fans for 100 years. And I can't explain it. So to your point, that's how differentiating it is. All that to be said, because pro football was born in Canton, Ohio, football looms large in the state, and especially looms large in Northeast Ohio. And Paul Brown, it's not enough time to talk about it. People need to, I could do a couple shows on Paul Brown alone. Paul Brown means a lot. That's why they're named the Browns. And that has a lot of history behind it, as did the Colts, and why it was such a shocking thing when the Colts moved out. It's same for the Browns. That
well,
name,
part of the vilification of Modell comes from Brown as well.
That's my point.
Your grandparents were pissed at Art.
Oh, everybody was. And again, like it looms large. So that's why the history of football, because it was born in Canton for pro football, it just means so much to the Cleveland, Ohio area. But the Indians fans, I will say, to your point about the Ripken years and when you guys were selling out and you guys had honestly, people forget the Indians and Orioles played twice. In '96, you guys broke our hearts because you took Baltimore.
The Alomar home run, man. That was great.
Devastating. But I was like, I still can see it today. Because I thought, oh, that was a bad loss. Anyways, though, in '97, we got the revenge back. But Baltimore and Cleveland has had a lot of in fact, we could talk about this more. There's been a lot of interactions. But the baseball in the late '90s between the Orioles and Indians was wonderful baseball. Mussina and Charlie Nagy games. There were several that come to mind. Obviously, mine more memorable is Game 6 in '97. But there's many times when those teams went head to head. And the Yankees always take the glory, but the Orioles and Indians were wonderful teams in the mid-'90s, and they had wonderful, wonderful matchups. But again, going back to your original question,
I got a fun picture to share with you. Here's a da-da-da. There you go. Little boomer there for you from the – see the tribe there and the Florida Marlins, the upstart Marlins of the World Series. It was actually snowing when that picture was taken. Yeah, only in Cleveland.
Yeah, I forgot who won that World Series. But anyways, it was we
had the most wins that year. We were the 1 seed. Yeah, I could – doesn't mean much.
It didn't work. Tony Fernandez was wonderful, and boy, Jose Mesa still this day. Shake your head. But anyways, there is a lot of history with the Indians, but the Indians sadly have had consistency of when they don't think there's a winner on the field, they do not come. They're very loyal fans. By the way, here's one more note: Indians ratings are some of the best in baseball locally, television wise. They were last year. They'll be again this year. People go to watch a tribe on television. But will they go to the game itself? Not so much. Oh my gosh, look at that handsome man.
This is a couple days after this guy hit the home run. See that cell phone, the flip phone there, a little on your cell one Jada plan. And look at Omar Vizquel
from Venezuela.
Yeah, it's one of my people. Andy Billman is here. He directs things at da. Are you still at ESPN, or you give me
I have my own company now. I partnered up with a person named Fritz Mitchell and Paul Carruthers. We met each other through the industry. We did a lot of 30 for 30s together, and you just connect with people in life. And in 2018, ESPN was wonderful to me in my career, but it comes a point where you go, I think I could do this on my own, and I ended up partnering with those two guys. We have our own film company. We have currently 5 documentaries in production right now.
Let's film what you did. But you were like a sports nerd from Elyria, right? Like you went to work at the network to do whatever that happened, right? Like it was.
I read when you were doing games in Cleveland. I was reading that big Oberman Patrick book, The Big Show. Remember that book when it came out in the mid '90s?
Yeah.
I had that book. I was reading it, and because I went to a very private Catholic school, so I was reading it in religion class, getting yelled at by the nuns because I wanted to do that. And yeah, my dream was always to make it there. University of Toledo, Columbus, Ohio. Was born in Cleveland and Elyria. Columbus, my high school years. Toledo. Went out to Bristol, Connecticut. And boy, the East Coast shock. I could do a whole.
Dude, I'm going through these pictures, man. Drew Carey. I mean, just look, the mascot over here. I don't even know the mascot. Is it Slugger? What the hell's the mascot's name?
Slider.
That's it. This is my favorite one though. Joe Walsh at the All-Star game.
Oh, that's cool.
I love your town, dude. I like the rivalry. I really do.
I do too. I wanted to bring this up. The Ravens and Browns are supposed to hate each other for obvious reasons. We just went through it, and they should hate each other. But it doesn't mean I love rivalries in sports. I study sports. You do too. Rivalries are very, very important.
I thought I wanted a rivalry until like Baker Mayfield come and you guys got better. Now I don't like it anymore. I liked it better when you sucked. I really did.
I don't blame you. I'd be feeling the same way. And look, it is for everything that went well last year for the Browns. My God, did it go well? Not beating the Ravens is not good. We need to beat the Ravens this year. You need to knock them off. And Lamar Jackson's a
better tackle number 8. You better keep back in the bathroom next time. You know?
Let me ask you, what did you think of that Monday Night Football game? That was one, and we lost, but that was one of the most dramatic plays. It felt like a big game, even in Monday night in a regular season. That felt big. It was big, and even in a loss, I was like, God, what a wonderful. It was a wonderful football game. Just didn't end up right, but it was a wonderful, wonderful game.
So here's a weird thing for me. I've been going to Cleveland since Elway. I told you that. Since 99, the team comes back. I've gone to every game, right? I was out there when Barack Obama and Springsteen were playing after a Ravens game with 500,000 people. That happened, post Ravens game one day. I've taken fans out. We've partied. We've, done paninis in the Strip and gone. We've done all that. I went to the old flats, the new flats, all the flats.
Banana Joe's probably.
Believe me, I've done it all. But so here's the deal. I've gone out there all those years, and the team has stunk for the most part. Bloodied our noses a couple of times when we had some decent teams. Certainly always kept Flacco. It was always 19-16 with 3 minutes left, and it was always that way with Flacco. When we had Billick and Ray, it was a little bit different. A lot of slobber knockers. This was the year because of COVID. I've missed 8 Ravens games in my life, home and away, in any continent, anywhere, right? Like, I am the Ravens historian guy. My wife had cancer in 14 and 15. I missed a couple of games then, but other than that, I don't miss games. Last year, I decided, all right, COVID, I'll strap up. I went down to Houston. Nobody there. I'm sitting on the roof. It was morose. I went to Philly and Washington because they were close. And then I just wrote it off. Like in November, I'm like, I'm not going to Foxborough. That was the night it rained buckets and I didn't need to be there. I mean, I'm watching the game with my cat, my wife. I'm tweeting. I'm eating I'm eating Pizza John's. I'm like hanging out. The Cleveland game happens and I'm like, oh, this is a great year to take a mulligan. Look, it's December, Cleveland. Don't have to be there this year. My wife fell asleep. My wife's like all cuddled up in bed. It's 10 o'clock. And this thing happens on my television. And I'm like, do you know how many times I've sat in that press box watching the same 4 guys in the club level, rip the couch off the back, whatever the quarterback they had. And they would always turn around and beat on the glass in the press box and look at me because it's my fault that your team sucks, right? And then this year, this amazing game happens and I'm watching it on TV. And all I could think about was that little press room next to the locker room where I've seen mostly happy Billocks and mostly happy Harbaughs. And I'm thinking of all the years to not go. I missed the Willis Reed game. So I don't know. I mean, it was great, but it was
an impressive game.
It was weird.
Hopefully it flips this year to us. I think it will, but
you're a believer, right? Like you think the Browns are going to win the Super Bowl one day?
They're going to Super Bowl. There's no doubt. We're going to get clowning. We're going to Super Bowl. We got tickets. I'm booking flights now. Like we're going. Like Baltimore, get ready. Hop on board. We're going. We took care of Big Ben. Lamar, we beat Lamar 2 years ago in a great game where Nick Chubb ran all over the Ravens. So we're going to get back to the Ravens. Bengals. But so we got this. We're very cocky, but I'm more cocky than other fans. But in my lifetime, I have never felt this way. I felt this way about the Cavs with LeBron in the 60s.
Well, you probably should have. I mean, they did come close a couple times.
Mid 90s Indians for sure, right? The 80s Browns, that's when I was becoming, I was 8 or 9 or 10. But I knew they were good, but I didn't know if they were Giants good with LT or, even Redskins good that year with Doug Williams. I didn't know. This Browns team, look, there's challenges. My gosh, you still have to get by. You have to beat the Ravens. You got to do something against the Chiefs. You got to beat Pittsburgh. Well, that's true. But I'm so confident in how this team's running. I love Andrew Berry. There's a sense of calm. So many times in Cleveland, as fans, it felt like chaos. I mean, let's not go through it. There's chaos. The calmness.
Yeah, I knew all of those guys. Pettin, Savage, Kukinis. Just go down the list. Hugh, all of them. Yes.
Ray Farmer, and even like Dorsey, who we did like Dorsey as fans. it felt like it was still all over the place, and it was still like a rubber ball in a racquetball room, just like
The Johnny Manziel thing, and how that took down my boy
vomiting,
Pettin, but
vomiting. All that to be said, though, this year we are very confident, and it's legitimate. The Browns, look, what does it mean in the long run? Look, I'm okay now. My reality cap, who knows? But do I feel confident? Oh my God, yes. Oh my God, yes. How could you not? This is the year. We're going to big places. Come on board.
Come to Baltimore, and you and I will make a movie about Believeland for these clowns over here, okay? Because at some point, I mean, I know what it's like to hurt, I guess is what I'm saying. I know what it's like to hurt.
I do. Let me ask you guys this, because then I'm going to ask you a Maryland question. What is turf basketballs? When I grew up, it was Gary Williams. It was very much excitement. The ACC. Have you embraced the Big Ten, or Maryland Terrapin fans?
Well, I mean, I've embraced it because I embrace reality. I'm a real big believer in change and adaptability. It's been the story of my life. So things are going to change, and you probably should move along with it. I go up and down the river with this all the time because there's no one we hate in the Big Ten. And I had my buddy on last week, my Carolina buddy. He's a Rush fan. We talked about Neil Peart, and we played in the Carolina pep band, and he was a media wannabe. He was one of my producers from 28 years ago, literally. And we both hate Duke, and we had that in common. And now we're gone, right? And he's all crying about Maryland's gone, and I'm like, the only reason Tobacco Road wanted Maryland was the money that DC and Baltimore and the state might have had. Same reason the Big Ten wanted it. But now you're in there, it's like, we don't even hate Penn State, Rutgers, Ohio State. I mean, we should feel good when Ohio State loses and feel good when Michigan loses, but we're not there yet. I mean, for sure. And the football side, you're going to get your ass kicked. You know that. The basketball side is that the Big Ten was supposed to be good this year, and apparently
I'm a big Purdue fan, and the basketball tournament this year is very oh God, that was awful. But Purdue's going to be very good next year, thank God. But
a game in Mackey, by the way.
Oh my God, Mackey's great, isn't it? My God, Mackey Arena is wonderful. I do think, though, for the Terp fans out there who are listening, I do think you're bringing up a good point. And this is why rivalries are important. Maryland does need that rivalry. Who's that going to be yet? I don't know. It would really help Maryland if Rutgers was good because of the close proximity and right up 95. That would be cool.
Well, we hated Penn State forever, but they kicked their ass. Joe Paterno, look at the Penn State-Maryland rivalry of the 60s, 70s, and 80s.
The 80s, with when you guys had Wright and you guys had Boomer. I'm sure in those days it was.
Maryland never won. They tied once.
Okay, but still, that's competitive. I mean, that's something. I will say, though, Micah Strawberry, I hope I'm saying his last name right. He's a Purdue assistant and just took the Penn State job. I think he's a very good coach. So Penn State basketball, I think, has a chance to bounce back. When it comes to football, I'll say this about Maryland. I believe you guys have always had the athletes. When I watch Maryland play, because you guys beat Texas a couple of years back to back in the openers. So it's like you watch Maryland football, you're like, well, they're not terrible. They're beating Texas to start the year. And then something happens, and you can probably get into
the death of Jordan McNair was, I had his father on this week, Marty McNair, talking about the foundation and the work that they're doing to keep athletes safe. And, they brought Durkin in, he brought the my way or the highway. And, they're rebuilding, kind of like
they've been rebuilding forever. I mean, the thing is, I'd say this about Maryland Terrapins. When I watch the Terps play football, there's sometimes, and I love Purdue, not so much anymore, but there are times when Purdue's they're not even on the same planet as Ohio State. When I watch Maryland walk on the field, I know they're not going to win at times. So I'm like, there's some athletes. I see players. I see players who can play on the Big Ten level. So I don't know what the missing scope is of there. Here's what also hurts Maryland. Again, though, you hit it. This rivalry thing. I do think you're right. Whether it's Penn State, whether it's Jersey and Rutgers, I think grabbing that will be big for the Terps. Because I love the basketball thing. I think your coach is wonderful. And,
they just re-upped him, and that's always they've been trying to fire him since he got here from the Midwest. So that's just kind of the way it goes.
I like him, though. I think he's a good coach.
They're winning games, and then they don't win games in March. So that's just kind of where it is. Andy Billman does this. Tell everybody where to find your film and plug away on an incredible 100-year story about Cleveland baseball history.
Warren the Diamond. There's a website. If you go on to it, we're also doing a page that's launching today that will break down rivalry from the conflicts. Something we didn't bring up is George Steinbrenner is a Clevelander who tried to buy the Indians in 1971. It failed. He ended up buying the New York Yankees, of course. So we're gonna get
Changed history.
Yes, it did. Changed everything. As Clevelanders, that's another one of our moments that we talk about. What if George Steinbrenner bought the Indians? And then we get into Bob Feller. Bob Feller is a great, wonderful Hall of Fame pitcher. Hated the Yankees. Hated them really from his starting days. He actually wrote an autobiography about how much he couldn't stand and loved beating the Yankees. So there's all these tie-ins to this film. We obviously talk about Chapman and Mays. You can go to it. You Google it. War on the Diamond. There's going to be a Kickstarter page. It breaks down everything from head to toe, gets into the Jabba Chamberlain Bugs game, to other events. There's a famous fate with Joe Pepitone where he took on the whole Indians team. There's a terrible story in 1970 where Ray Fosse was catching for the Indians and a cherry bomb went underneath him and was lit in the Bronx and exploded underneath his feet. People were arrested. There's a lot of crazy incidents with the Indians.
Well, Ray Fosse, he had a rough go, huh?
Boy, he did. Wonderful player. By the way, Ray's broadcaster right now. But there's all this stuff. Dennis Eckersley was a starting pitcher for I Hate Yankee Hanky Night. There's all this great history between these two clubs. We bring it into film. Please check it out. And I do think it's more than just Yankees and Indians. It's a baseball story. If you love baseball and you love hearing these names and you wonder more about them, we're going to get into the Trust speakers who played for Boston before he came to Cleveland. And same with Ruth, obviously, Boston coming to New York.
They made a movie about this. They put Pete Vukovich in as the bad guy, right? Remember that?
I do.
He wore Yankees, right? The Yankees were the bad guys in the movie, right?
They are always, they always put that role. And by the way, Major League, you got to beat the Yankees to get in the playoffs. So everybody should check it out. Again, it's a baseball film. It's a sports film. If you love conflict and championships and rivalries, you'll love this film. It doesn't matter what kind of sports life you walk into. I think you'll really enjoy it.
Hey, man, appreciate the visit. Appreciate your work in Believeland and Escobars. And it's really nice to visit with you and hang out. And, one day I might even eat the mustard in Cleveland. Probably not, though.
Well, I'll tell you what. I'll put a little bit of mustard and I'll eat a little bit of your crab cakes and we'll call it a day.
Now you're talking. I'm doing a crab cake tour this summer. Next time you come here, you will not eat Tom's crab cakes in my town.
John, in fact, I'm hitting you up because I want to see the whole thing.
Andy Billman joining us here from the land of Cleve. Pride of Illyria, now in Connecticut, former ESPN. You can find his film, War on the Diamond. By the way, all things baseball alive here as the Orioles are getting it going. Luke Jones with full coverage from over at Oriole Park at Camden Yards. You can find it all together out at WNST.net, where our intelligent conversations have become wise conversations in partnership with our friends at Wise Markets. I'm Nestor. We're WNST, BaltimorePositive.com.